ask you next about the quality of judges coming into the Supreme Court and the High Courts at this moment. You spoke of social media. As a consequence of Twitter, Facebook, there's now a lot of trolling. We've heard some oral observations about it. Do you, Chief Justice, follow social media? Are you seeing what is being said about you on Twitter, for example, where everybody seems to have an opinion, everybody seems to know, everybody seems to think they know more than the Chief Justice?
I don't know if this is a confession, but I don't follow Twitter. Just for the reason that I think, it's important for us not to be affected by the cacophony of extreme views which you sometimes find on Twitter. Which is, I have a view on Twitter as well. And I think that, social media is a product of the times, not just a product of technology, but a product of our times. See, 20 or 30 years ago, when you had, say, 3 or 4 mainstream newspapers reporting from the Supreme Court, you had the beat reporters sitting in the Supreme Court, and they'll pick out an odd case to report. Social media has changed all that. There's live tweeting of every word that is said in the court. Now, that puts an enormous amount of burden on us as well. In our courts, much of the argument which takes place is a dialogue between the bar and the bench. It's not just an address where one lawyer will speak, the judges will keep quiet, the other lawyer will speak, the judges will keep quiet, at the end of it, announce your verdict. That's not the way it is. It's a conversation. It's so typical of our culture. We interrupt each other, we joke, we have serious arguments, there's a little bit of camaraderie even between opponents, so on and so forth. Now, what happens really is this, that what is expressed in a court during the course of a hearing is not the expression of the ultimate view which a judge is going to take. Suppose you are arguing before me, or a lawyer is arguing before me. There are 2 types of judges. One, and I've appeared before both, I don't know which category I belong to. One type of judges consists of those who play the devil's advocate. Whoever is arguing will get the stick, in the sense the judge will try and find deficiencies in the argument. The other kind of judges are judges who will stretch an argument to its logical conclusion. So if you are making a point, the judge will stretch your argument and test the limits of the point which you are making. So you have 2 different personalities, judges who play the devil's advocates and a judge who will stretch your argument. He will take your argument to its logical conclusion. The lawyer feels very nice about it as well. Now, what happens as a result of social media is that when there is an expression of opinion by the judge, the public seems to believe that this is the way the judge is going to ultimately decide, which is far from the truth. A case is not decided until the last word in the case is said. And I know of so many cases where I have really changed my view, probably at the last minute of the argument, because something very seminal was said at the end of the argument. That's what an open court hearing is all about. And lawyers always tell us this in court, that we are fearful of judges who keep their mouth shut. Because if a judge is quiet in a hearing and doesn't tell you how they believe or what they feel about a case, you don't know which way the judge's mind is working. It's only when the judge is open that you can answer the judge's doubts. But social media sometimes doesn't follow that, or citizens don't follow that. And I don't blame them, because everybody is not conversant with the processes of the court. So what is the answer? The answer is not to have a more closed system, but to have a more open system, so that people really truly understand the nature of the judicial process.
You said you're off Twitter. Do you watch TV? Do you watch television debates? One guy take on another. Does public opinion impact, to what extent, your thinking and ultimately your judgments?
Yes, bits and pieces. But speaking for myself, I try and read as broadly as possible, because one of the flip sides about being a judge is the sense of isolation which it breeds. Now, the isolation which we have is possibly the reason why we are independent. We don't mix around too much. Our friends are pretty much friends we made years and years ago. But that's also a problem, because your sources of information, your sources of knowledge are therefore confined to what you can absorb. So what I try and do is to read as broadly as possible, as diversely as possible, to try and get a broad cross-section of viewpoints on what is happening in society. Having said that, when a case opens up for hearing, you have to tell yourself that all that you have gathered from outside the 4 corners of the pleadings in the case has to be kept out, and you will decide the case on the basis of the record before you. That's really part of your training as a judge, which you acquire over the years. It's also of confronting your own biases. We're all human beings. So it would be hypocritical again to say that we don't have our own views, our own ideas about various issues of life. But then you have to confront your own self when you are judging and tell yourself that, well, I'm not going to allow my own personal preferences to affect the outcome of this case. My own lifestyle, my own values, what I learned from my professors, what I learned from my family. So you need to be, in that sense, very careful that while you judge others, you're not judgmental of others. And I think that's very important because it's so easy in the office which we occupy.